Welcome to A Date with Darkness podcast, where I will be discussing the impact of hurtful and abusive relationships and how to overcome them so that you can move through your pain and get to the kind of healthy relationships you want, need, and deserve. I'm Dr. Natalie Jones. I'm a licensed psychotherapist based in California. While I hope that you find this podcast educational and informational, please note it should not be substituted for treatment with a licensed mental health professional. Also, due to the nature of the podcast, some of the information presented on the show can be sensitive to some of my listeners, so please note that listener discretion is advised. Hello and welcome back to the show. I'm so happy that you were able to join me for another weekly episode of the podcast. Sorry about that there. So for this episode, of course, it's going to be a continuation or a part two to last week's episode. If you remember, last week's episode is where I was talking about the narcissist behavior around the holidays. And this week, I'm going to talk a little bit about how to effectively manage or cope with the narcissist behavior around the holidays. But before we get into that, I definitely like to kick off by doing some of the administrative stuff. Of course, the group and individual membership coaching is opening up. If you want to be on the list to be notified about that, please click the link in the show notes to sign up for the mailing list for that so that you can be the first in the know to know when that's opening and be sure to get your slot. Also, excuse me. Also, if you like and love the podcast and you find it informational, please do go to Apple Podcasts and leave a positive review, or on your podcast player that you listen to. If it's Podcast Addict, iHeartRadio, what have you, please leave a positive review so that other listeners can find the show. And that's how you can show your support. And also making sure to share the episode with people that you think would find it useful. If you have any questions for me or comments about the show, feel free to email me at adatewithdarkness@gmail.com. You can listen to this show as well as all of the other episodes of the podcast on the website, drnataliejones.com, and feel free to sign up for the mailing list there also, where you can currently download your free book on how to determine whether or not you are a toxic person. So that is free for you now. All right. And now, without further ado, I definitely would like to hop on into the show and talk a little bit about, what we were talking about last week. Last week, I was having a discussion with you all about narcissistic behaviors around the holidays. And also, one of the things that I think is important to note on this episode, as well as, the holiday edition episodes, is that, what I'm going to be discussing, or the behaviors that I'm going to be discussing around the holidays is going to be based on U.S. cultural norms of Christmas and New Year's and Thanksgiving holidays. So it's going to be based off of my experience and how those holidays are traditionally celebrated. It's very commercialized here in the U.S. With a gift giving, monetary value culture. And so I'm going to be drawing from that, since that is what a lot of the folks that I work with identify with. And I want to preface the episode with that, because I know that I have a lot of listeners, as well as my assistant and my editors are outside of the US. So, just a little bit of feedback there, that I realize that not everyone, the practices may be different depending on where you are in the world and what your cultural norms are. So I just want to preface this episode by saying that. All right, so let's hop on into it. Last week when I talked about the behaviors, and what I'll do, just in case you didn't listen to last week's episode, or for, you don't necessarily remember all of the behaviors that I talked about in terms of the narcissist behaviors around the holidays. What I will do is I will, briefly review what those behaviors are and then go into how you can cope with them. So hopefully that will be easy for you to follow along and keep track. Okay. So the first thing I want to talk about is a narcissist's tendency to, um, you know, have to disappear around the holidays, to essentially ghost you, and disappear for an unspecified amount of time and then suddenly reappear after the holidays are over. um, when someone ghosts you, or when they usually pull a disappearing act, in my experience, it's typically not the first time. If you've been in a longer relationship with them, it's usually not the first time. They historically have a pattern of ghosting you. It might be for a shorter amount of time. It might be that they may have provided, a lame excuse or whatnot, maybe the first couple of times, but usually a pattern is developed when someone ghosts you. If you have been with someone for a significant amount of time, a narcissist, and they pull a disappearing act, and you have a history of them pulling that, I would say that for you, in order to kind of prepare and cope with this, if this is a relationship that you are staying in for whatever your reasons are, prepare for the disappearing acts. You know that they're going to happen, so prepare the holiday as though that person is going to disappear or ghost you or be gone, but also try to effectively insert a boundary. And I say try because, in my experience, narcissists don't really respond well and don't really respect boundaries. And if you're choosing to stay in a relationship with a narcissist, then you must know that they are habitual boundary crosser. So, that's going to be the thing, but establish the boundary that, once they leave, they cannot freely come back, and so that's a boundary that you establish, that, hey, I know that this is what your pattern is. Call them out on it and say, I know that this is what the pattern is, and I'm well aware of what the tradition is in terms of you kind of leaving for a period of time. But just know that if you leave and choose not to celebrate, or you choose to just be gone, that it's not acceptable for you to kind of come and go as you please. And so I won't be welcoming you back with open arms upon your return. In that, it's so try to enforce the boundary there. But just, that's an example of how the boundary can look like. Hey, this is not a place where you can kind of come and go. Like, you may be a family. If you're a family, then express that we're a family, and this is what, the expectations are, and express what the disappointment is, but also let them know that, you know, there's a short threshold. I would say to insert the boundary that it's not okay for them to come and go, and talk about that. But I would also say, I would say this with a caveat, that don't be sure not to throw out consequences or ultimatums or things that you're not prepared to back up. So if you say, hey, if you leave and go and, do your thing, and, based upon your history, I'm not going to be here when you come back. Be prepared to back that up. Don't just do empty veil threats where you're just going to go, and then you're going to say that, and then they go and they come back, and then things are going to pick up right back where they left off. So if you're going to insert boundaries, if you're going to say those things, be prepared to back up the consequences that you are talking about, okay? Because they definitely will test that limit to see how much they can get away with. Because again, you're talking about someone who believes that rules don't apply to them, consequences don't apply to them. And so they feel like they are very entitled to do what they want to do and not answer to anybody. So just FYI there. Number two, I talked about how, with the narcissist, they can make the holiday a living hell by throwing a tantrum, making a scene, being very abusive physically, emotionally, psychologically, financially, giving the silent treatment to everyone by sulking, maybe even doing property destruction in the house. One of the things that I would recommend, and again, this is again a caveat that I have based upon your situation and your comfort level in your safety, how much safety is being threatened by this, especially if you have someone that's being very destructive to the home or being abusive. My recommendation is when you have someone that's being abusive or being destructive, is to call the police and, let them know that that's not okay, but call the police. That's what the police are there for, is to protect your well-being. So if that's something where you feel like your safety is threatened or the safety of your children or your family is being threatened, then contact the police. If contacting the police is not something that you feel comfortable with or something that you feel very intimidated about doing because there may be some backlash or you're just not ready to take that step yet for whatever your reasons are, I would, one of the other things that I would definitely try to recommend is spending your holidays elsewhere. So if you have extended family, friends, family, or extended family, or, even neighbors sometimes are very welcoming around this time. If you have established a community rapport with your neighbors, spend the holidays elsewhere if that's something that you feel comfortable doing. I would encourage you to surround yourself with support, and do things like that, or create some. If you can't do that, I would encourage you to, go somewhere else and try to figure out another holiday traditions. There are places that may be open depending on where you live. There's, 24-hour restaurants, 24-hour places. A lot of times the movies and things like that are open on the holidays. So maybe establishing a new routine and removing yourself from the house and from that person's presence when they've created a hostile environment by having activities to do outside of the home or surrounding yourself with another social and emotional support, or just spending your holidays being loved on somewhere else with, a family member, friend, or extended family or something like that, or neighbors, as I've mentioned. Okay. When number three, I had mentioned, when the narcissist gives you a gift and they want to take it back, um, as a form of retaliation or as an act of defiance or as a power trip to try to show you who's in charge or that they have the power in the relationship and that they can, they want to try to demean you or make you feel a way because, you may have pissed them off or whatever. And it's not saying that you did anything. It's just meaning that they can't manage their emotional rage enough to have a cohesive conversation. So if you have a narcissist in your life that's wanting to take their gift back, I would say you should gladly return the gift. I would not engage. I would not argue. I wouldn't, try to, do this tug of war where you try to take the gift back or you're questioning why they're taking it back. Here, have it back. Take it back to the store, donate it, do whatever you want to do with it. That's fine. That's your prerogative to do that. Give it back. It's not worth the argument. It's not worth getting your blood pressure up. It's not worth getting into a tizzy or a tailspin or a physical altercation, because remember, they thrive off of negative attention. And the one thing that you can do is to protect yourself, preserve your energy, take your power back, not engage and not argue. Just give it to them and go on about your day. Right? Okay. All right. Number 4, when the narcissist in your life refuses to participate in the festivities, such as, decorations, cooking, helping with cleaning and things like that after people have been over to the home, you know, here's what I recommend. I would recommend ignoring them and their negative energy for refusing to participate. Just like they're refusing, they're kind of sulking in the corner, or they don't want to participate. Again, they're doing things to draw and attract energy, negative energy. And they're also doing things as a form of retaliation or acting out for whatever the reason is. It has nothing to do with you. Again, this is someone who cannot effectively manage their behavior and their emotions. Just ignore them and don't give them that energy, and go on about your day and do what you need to do. Okay. And if they must be there, or you can, kindly invite them to do something else away from the home or away from the festivities, if they're kind of getting in the way and they're kind of refusing to do that. Right. The other thing is not, it depends on how far you want to go and how far they are, how much they're acting up, or how far they're willing to go to basically self-destruct the holiday. You can always ask them to leave. You're not welcome in the home. You're not welcome here, or that kind of behavior is not tolerated. So asking them to leave, or even removing yourself, if you're going with them to a party and you guys are expected to kind of help or pitch in or do things, you can remove yourself in that way. Okay. When the narcissist in your life, number 5 is where we're at. If the narcissist in your life is refusing to open your gifts, or they're degrading your gifts, if they have a history of doing this, then you know that more than likely that they have this established pattern of refusing to open gifts or degrading your gifts. Again, by doing that, by having that act of defiance, or having just trying to tear you down and embarrass you in front of everyone, again, that draws that negative attention, and makes it all about them, and leaves you feeling very bamboozled as to why this person is doing this, or why they're choosing not to engage, or why they're choosing to be hurtful in this way. I would say if they have this history, do not buy them gifts. Don't even entertain the idea. Once they've established a pattern, if it's 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years in a row, they have this pattern of degrading or tearing down gifts, tearing down the thought or the sentiment behind you getting them a gift, or they're not appreciative of it. I wouldn't engage in that. I would not spend my time, money. I wouldn't recommend spending time, money, and energy to go out and support that. So I would recommend not buying gifts, or if this is, if you're new, or you've kind of sat on the fence about this and you kind of wanted to test this out to see, maybe you were hoping that things would turn out differently this year, and perhaps they still engage in the same behavior, I would say return the gift to the store, or re-gift it to someone else that might want the gift or may need the gift. I would just say, you have the option to, if they choose not to open it, or they degrade it and then they toss your gift to the side, take it back and return it to the store. But I would also remind you to remember that their behavior is not about you. It's not about anything that you did. It's really not even about the gift. It's more about them, and them sort of drawing that energy and just being very negative and being very toxic. Okay. Number 7, if there's if the narcissist in your life does a, I'm sorry, number 6, if the narcissist in your life is wants to do a power play by getting you a degrading gift, right? Or they want to um they want to kind of do a power play by by showing maybe by demonstrating maybe who the golden child is and who the scapegoat child is. And a lot of times they'll try to demonstrate this by getting someone the more favorable gift, or maybe a high dollar, high value, over the top gift, right? That's a show off gift. And then getting the other person like nothing, or they get them a very degrading and menial gift, right? And so my solution to combat this is letting them know that, hey, this is not acceptable. We can't accept gifts. We won't accept either gift, right? If it's something where they've kind of done a power play and they've given someone a menial gift and given someone an over the top extravagant gift, return both gifts to them and say it's not acceptable for us to take this. It's inappropriate, and we would appreciate if you didn't do that anymore. If you didn't buy gifts that that are clearly separate in value for both people, one being fairly beneath, we would appreciate that you get either smaller gifts for both people if you want to give something, or if you feel like you're having trouble with that, don't get anything at all. So again, just returning it back and letting it know that it's unacceptable, and coaching them and letting them know what is more appropriate and acceptable in terms of the gift. And then, just letting them know that it's, I appreciate what you thought about it, thought about me. You thought enough to give me this gift if the gift was degrading personally to you, but it's not something I'm just going to have to give this gift back to you because it's not an appropriate gift for me, right? Especially if it's a very degrading, demeaning gift. This gift is not appropriate. You can have it back. Thank you, but no thank you. Okay. Number 7, you know, if um if they're refusing to celebrate the holidays with you, but then you find that they are having a great time elsewhere, um I would, the tip that I have is and I think I talked a little bit about this on the last episode, is making sure that you go out and you celebrate your holiday for you, taking a step back and saying, once again, here's this person that's refusing to celebrate with me, but they're going out and they have this almost like this separate identity where they choose to separate themselves from you, which you may be their family member, you may be a wife, husband, children, or whatever. Try to separate yourself from that. And again, know that that's not about you, that they've chosen to, ice you out, for lack of a better word, ice you out and go out and spend the holiday with someone else. Recognize that it's not about you. Do what you need to do to have a great time. So whether that be that you spend it with someone else, or you guys as a family continue to do your thing and move on from it, and just recognize that that has nothing to do with you, that you take it for what it is and you spend your time with others that are, again, willing to love on you. I would not get into a big, huge altercation with them again if they're drawing this negative attention. I wouldn't want to get into a big, huge altercation trying to challenge them about their behavior, because again, this is feeding into what they want, right? This is taking away from your energy. And you have to accept, if you're going to be in a life with if you're going to spend your life with a narcissist, there's a part of you that has to accept that this person cannot show up for you in the way that a healthy person can. So there's a lot of people that, they know that perhaps that the person that they're with is very narcissistic, but they try to twist, turn, and bend and get this person to change into a loving, caring, kind person because they believe that they can change that person. You cannot change a narcissist. You cannot change, even if the person wasn't a narcissist, you cannot change them. A person has to have personal responsibility for their actions and be willing to change themselves. So they have to be willing to do the work in order for personal growth and change. That is something that you will never be able to do, and you can never force another person to do. So the one thing that you can do though is come to a place of acceptance. If that is a relationship that that you've chosen to stay in for whatever your reasons are, right? Which we won't get into that here now and today. But if you've chosen to stay in that relationship, then you've got to accept that that person is always going to put themselves first. They're going to do things that are very hurtful. They're not going to necessarily, they're not going to care about your feelings. They're not going to care about how this impacts you. And so that has to be something that you have to accept. So the best thing that I can recommend for you is that you take the time to care for yourself, look out for your family, plan for that, and try to have as much of a great time without letting this person destroy your holiday or destroy a good time that you may be having. And the same thing is also true if that person, if the narcissist chooses not to acknowledge you, right? Let's see that you have a parent who has discarded you as a child, and maybe they've remarried or something like that. Maybe they have another family, or you have someone that again, maybe you're supposed to be in a relationship with, and they choose not to acknowledge you at all, meaning that they act like you don't even exist on the holiday. Again, take it for what it is. This is them acting out. If this is someone that you choose to have in your life, just make sure that you take care of yourself, your emotional health, you spend time with others. I would also go out on another limb and say that, and this applies for all the little bullet points that I have, is that you want to be doing the mental work. If you've decided to stay in a relationship with a narcissist, or maybe you've even just joined a relationship with a narcissist and you're not really sure what it is, do the mental work that it takes to protect yourself. So I would always encourage any of my listeners, all of my listeners, or anybody that may see this, to go to therapy. Be sure that you're taking care of yourself and you're working through this. If this is someone that you've been with for a number of years, and even if you know how this person is going to act, it's not going to be easy to deal with the hurt or the wounding or the chaos that goes on. So what you can do is emotionally try to prepare yourself and get some coping skills from your therapist, and work out a plan of action about how you're going to spend the holiday. So it's a solid plan. When these things happen, then you can do X, Y, and Z. What I'm giving is general tips, but the practitioner that you're working with may know a little bit more about your day-to-day life and your history with this person, and the two of you together can work out a solid plan for coping patterns and skills. Okay. The last one I had mentioned was stealing or selling gifts or gift monies to support addictions, which is something that happens quite a bit. There's a number of ways in which this can be handled, depending on your comfort level and depending on what your relationship is with that person, and just how you want to handle it. The first thing, one of the things that you can do is have contact the police and report a theft. Right? That is something that I know that a lot of people will feel is very challenging and very harsh to do. But nor if think about it this way, if a person that you didn't know broke into your home and did the same thing, what would your actions be? Would you treat them any differently, or would you kind of just let them go? So even if the narcissist is someone that you have an established history or relationship with, if they violate you by stealing gifts, robbing the children or you or family members or whomever of a Christmas, there should be consequences for that. I understand that contacting the police is not for everyone and that there's people that may have reservations about that. But what you can also do is have them removed from the home, and tell them that their behavior is no longer acceptable. And as such, part of the consequences is that they are no longer welcome here in your home. Okay, so that's kind of my list of how to cope with each bullet point. But again, the overall tips that I mentioned are some definitely would be therapy. It's definitely developing a plan of action for when this person does act up, or having a backup plan for yourself when you're during the holidays. So that backup plan could look something like going over to your parents' house, or going over to another family member's house, or a neighbor's house, or your best friend's house, or somebody else that you know from work may be having a holiday party, or maybe you want to spend a day out, maybe going to see movies. And there are some places that are open to eat, very few, but I know that there's a lot of places that still remain open. So maybe you can get out and do that. But definitely having a plan. And if there's any sort of violence that happens, I would always recommend calling the police. You can also contact the National Domestic Violence Hotline. They are open 24/7 and available around the clock with counselors. So that's also another resource that I think would be helpful. Okay, so that's all I have for you for this evening. I hope that you found this podcast to be very informative. And until next time, I look forward to talking with you guys. Take care of yourselves, be well, and stay safe. Bye bye.